We've already paid the deposit for the venue. Your surgery can wait. Marcus only gets married once. That voicemail came from my mother at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 16 hours after I'd called her crying from a hospital bed, telling her my emergency surgery had been moved up to the same day as my brother's wedding. I'd just been diagnosed with a rapidly growing tumor near my spine that my neurosurgeon, Dr. Patricia Chen, said couldn't wait another week without risking permanent paralysis. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will choose a party over your life, and when they do, you discover exactly who you really are. Marcus was getting married on Saturday, June 15th. I was scheduled for a 12-hour spinal tumor removal surgery on Saturday, June 15th. My parents chose the wedding. Let me be clear about what that choice meant. Dr. Chen had explained it to me in terms even my non-medical brain could understand. The tumor was pressing against my L4 and L5 vertebrae. Every day we delayed increased the risk of permanent nerve damage. Every day we waited, I could lose feeling in my legs forever. Every day mattered. But my parents had already bought their outfits. The flowers were ordered. The caterer was confirmed. And Marcus, their golden boy, their perfect son who could do no wrong, was finally settling down with his college sweetheart Emma at 28. This was their moment to shine as the proud parents, to post pictures on social media, to bask in the glory of having raised such a successful son. I was just Sarah, 26 years old, working as a high school English teacher, living in a modest apartment in Columbus, Ohio. No husband, no engagement ring, no impressive career milestones to brag about at church functions. Just a daughter with a tumor who was threatening to ruin their perfect weekend. When I got that voicemail, I was lying in my hospital bed at Ohio State Medical Center, staring at the ceiling tiles I'd memorized over the past 3 days. I'd been having back pain for months, the kind that starts as a dull ache and slowly transforms into something that steals your sleep. I kept telling myself it was stress from work, from the long hours grading papers, from sleeping on my cheap mattress. Teachers don't make enough money for good furniture. But when I collapsed in my classroom while teaching Shakespeare to my sophomore students, when the pain shot down my legs like lightning and I couldn't feel my feet, I knew it was something more. The ambulance ride, the MRI, the worried faces of doctors studying my scans. It all led to Dr. Chen sitting beside my bed with a gravity I'd never seen in another person's eyes. Sarah, we need to operate immediately. This is a grade 2 astrocytoma that's putting significant pressure on your spinal cord. Every hour we delay increases the likelihood of permanent paralysis. I've scheduled you for this Saturday morning, and I need you to understand. This cannot wait. My first call was to my principal, Ms. Henderson, who immediately arranged for substitute coverage and told me not to worry about anything except getting better. My second call was to my best friend Jessica, who started crying before I even finished explaining. My third call was to my parents. Mom, I need you to sit down. I'm in the hospital and they found a tumor on my spine. I need surgery this Saturday or I might never walk again. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then came the sharp intake of breath, the "Oh my God, Sarah," and, for a moment, I felt the relief of having my mother's attention, her concern, her love. But Saturday is Marcus's wedding. 4 words that changed everything. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What can we do?" Not, "We'll be right there." Just the immediate calculation of how my medical emergency was going to inconvenience their social calendar. Mom, I could be paralyzed if I don't have this surgery. Can't they do it Monday or next week? Dr. Matthews has been planning this wedding for 2 years. All of Marcus's Harvard friends are flying in. The mayor is coming. This is the biggest event our family has ever hosted. Dr. Matthews was Emma's mother, a prominent attorney in Cincinnati who had connections my parents desperately wanted to maintain. The wedding wasn't just about Marcus finding love, it was about my parents. Social climbing, their chance to network with Ohio's elite, their opportunity to finally be somebody important. The doctor says it can't wait, Mom. If the tumor grows anymore, I could lose feeling in my legs permanently. Well, what does this doctor know anyway? Get a second opinion. These doctors always want to rush into surgery. It's probably not as serious as they're making it sound. I spent the next hour explaining medical terminology I barely understood myself, reading directly from Dr. Chen's notes, even offering to have the doctor call my parents directly. But every medical fact I presented was met with skepticism. Every urgent timeline was dismissed as doctors being dramatic or money-hungry. The real breaking point came when my father took the phone. "Sarah, honey, you have to understand. We've invested $40,000 in this wedding. The venue alone cost us $15,000. Your mother bought a $4,000 dress. We've already taken time off work, booked the hotel rooms, arranged for your Aunt Helen to fly in from California. We can't just cancel everything because you're having some back problems." Back problems. That's what he called a spinal tumor that could leave me in a wheelchair. Besides, he continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I remembered, from childhood disagreements, if it was really that serious, wouldn't they have found it sooner? You've been complaining about back pain for months. It's probably just a pinched nerve or something they're calling fancy names to justify expensive surgery. That night, after hanging up on my father's medical expertise, I called my brother directly. Marcus had always been different from our parents, more thoughtful, more empathetic. Surely he would understand. Surely he would tell our parents to prioritize my health over his party. "Sarah, I'm so sorry this is happening," Marcus said, and for a moment I felt hope. "But you have to understand my position here. Emma's parents have put so much money into this wedding. All my college roommates are flying in. My boss is coming with his wife. This isn't just about one day. This is about my future, my career connections, my relationship with Emma's family. Marcus, I might never walk again. Come on, don't be so dramatic. These doctors probably just want to make money off of you. Get the surgery next week. I promise the first thing Emma and I will do when we get back from our honeymoon is visit you in the hospital. We'll bring flowers and everything." The casual dismissal in his voice, the way he said, "Don't be so dramatic," like I was a teenager, throwing a tantrum instead of his sister facing potential paralysis. That's when I realized my family had already made their choice. The Golden Boy's perfect day mattered more than my ability to walk. I hung up and stared at my phone for 20 minutes before calling Dr. Chen's emergency line. "Dr. Chen, this is Sarah Mitchell. My family can't come to the surgery because of a wedding, but I need you to know something. I trust you more than I trust them. Schedule the surgery. I'll face this alone." Her voice was gentle but firm when she responded. "Sarah, you won't be alone. We'll take excellent care of you. But I need to ask, is your family aware of what could happen if we delay this surgery any longer?" They know. They just don't care. Enough to change their plans. The silence on the other end told me everything. Even my doctor, who had probably seen every kind of family dysfunction in her career, was shocked by the callousness of choosing a party over preventing paralysis. That's when Dr. Chen said something that would change everything. "Sarah, I want you to know that what they're doing isn't just morally wrong. It could be considered medical neglect if they're preventing you from accessing necessary care. There are laws about this kind of thing. Medical neglect. I'd never thought of it in legal terms, but as Dr. Chen explained, family members who interfere with someone's ability to receive necessary medical treatment can face serious consequences, especially when that interference could result in permanent disability. I went to sleep that Tuesday night with a decision crystallizing in my mind. My family had chosen to abandon me when I needed them most. They had prioritized social status over my health, a party over my future mobility, their reputation over my life. They thought I would just quietly accept their choice, reschedule my life-saving surgery around their social calendar, and pretend their abandonment didn't cut me to the bone. They were wrong, because what they didn't know was that Dr. Chen was more than just my neurosurgeon. She was a mandatory reporter, ethically bound to document cases of medical neglect. She was also the head of the neurosurgery department at one of Ohio's most prestigious medical centers, with connections to medical boards and patient advocacy organizations they couldn't even imagine. And me? I wasn't just their disappointing daughter anymore. I was a woman who had finally seen her family's true priorities, and I was about to document every single moment of their abandonment for the world to see. The surgery was scheduled for 6 a.m. Saturday morning. The wedding reception was set for 6 p.m. Saturday evening. By the time they were clinking champagne glasses and dancing to their carefully curated playlist, I would either be in recovery with full feeling in my legs, or I would be learning to navigate the world as a paraplegic. But regardless of how that surgery went, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what my parents had chosen. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't screaming or crying or begging. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Sometimes it's simply telling the truth, and the truth was about to become very, very public. Growing up in the Mitchell household wasn't about unconditional love. It was about earning your place at the table every single day, and that table always had a clear hierarchy. Dad sat at the head, Mom to his right, Marcus across from her in the golden seat, and me at the far end where the conversation died. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, had built their entire identity around appearing successful to the outside world. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for a medical device company, the kind of job that paid well enough for a nice house in Westerville's suburbs, but never quite enough for the lifestyle my parents craved. Mom was a part-time real estate agent who spent more money on designer handbags than she made in commissions, but she looked the part of success at the country club. They weren't evil people. They didn't beat us or scream or neglect our basic needs, but they had this way of making love feel conditional, like it was something you had to earn through achievements and good behavior, and most importantly, by making them look good in front of other people. Marcus understood the assignment from birth. Golden-haired, charming, naturally athletic, and blessed with the kind of easy confidence that made adults light up when he walked into a room. He played varsity baseball, got into Harvard on a partial scholarship, graduated magna cum laude with a business degree, and landed a job at a prestigious consulting firm in Cincinnati. Every milestone was a trophy my parents could display to their friends. Our son Marcus just got promoted again. Marcus bought a condo in the trendy part of downtown. Marcus is dating a lovely girl from a very prominent family. Marcus was their walking, talking proof that they had succeeded as parents. I was the rough draft, 2 years older than Marcus, but somehow always trailing behind in their eyes. I was the one who got good grades but not great grades, who made varsity soccer but didn't get a scholarship, who went to Ohio University instead of an Ivy League school, who became a teacher instead of landing a high-powered corporate job. "Sarah's doing fine," they would say when asked about me, the verbal equivalent of a shrug. Fine. Not exceptional, not impressive, just fine. The kind of daughter you mention briefly before steering the conversation back to your real success. Story. The pattern started early. When Marcus was 8 and I was 10, he broke Mom's favorite vase while throwing a baseball in the house. I was in the backyard reading when it happened, but when Mom found the pieces, Marcus pointed at me and said I'd been playing inside earlier. I got grounded for 2 weeks. Marcus got ice cream for being honest about what he saw. When we were teenagers, I saved up babysitting money for 3 months to buy Mom a necklace for her birthday. Marcus forgot completely. So he grabbed $20 from Dad's wallet and bought a card from the grocery store. Mom wore my necklace once, to church, then put it in her jewelry box where it stayed. Marcus's card sat on her dresser for 2 years. The message was always clear. Marcus's minimal effort was worth more than my maximum effort. His success reflected well on them. My success was unexpected and unremarkable. His failures were flukes or someone else's fault. My failures were character flaws that needed correction. College was where the divide became impossible to ignore. Marcus got into Harvard, and my parents threw him a graduation party with catered food and invited half the neighborhood. They bought him a car, paid for his dorm furnishings, and Dad took time off work to drive him to campus personally. I got into Ohio University with a partial academic scholarship, and Mom said, "Well, at least it's not community college." They gave me $800 and told me to figure out the rest. I worked 3 jobs during college, serving tables at a local diner, tutoring struggling students, and doing overnight shifts at the campus library. I graduated with a key 3.7 GPA and $12,000 in student loans. Marcus graduated with a 3.4 GPA and no debt. The family dynamics crystallized around money and status. Marcus's expensive tastes were investments in his future. My frugal choices were evidence that I lacked ambition. When Marcus wanted to take a post-graduation trip to Europe, Dad co-signed a credit card. When I asked if they could help with my student loan payments, Mom suggested I learned to budget better. After college, I moved back to Columbus and rented a small apartment near the school where I taught. I loved my job, loved working with teenagers, loved the feeling of making a difference in young people's lives, but teaching doesn't come with the salary that impresses people at dinner parties. Marcus moved to Cincinnati, bought his trendy condo, and started dating Emma Matthews, whose mother was one of the most successful defense attorneys in the state. Suddenly, every family gathering became the Marcus and Emma show. What they were doing, where they were going, what Emma's family thought about this or that. Dr. Matthews invited us to their country club for dinner, Mom would announce like she'd been granted an audience with royalty. Emma says her father might be able to help your dad make some connections in the medical device industry. Everything revolved around maintaining and building relationships with Emma's family. My parents weren't just gaining a daughter-in-law, they were gaining access to a social circle that had been closed to them their entire lives. Emma's parents had money, real money, the kind that came with generational wealth and political connections in summer homes. The engagement announcement was treated like a national holiday in our house. Mom called everyone she knew. Dad bought expensive champagne. They immediately started planning their outfits for the engagement party, which was held at the Matthews family estate in Indian Hill, one of Cincinnati's most exclusive neighborhoods. Was invited, of course, but my presence felt perfunctory. I was the sister who had to be included but wasn't really part of the celebration. I wore a dress from Target and watched my parents mingle with people who casually mentioned their vacation homes and charity board positions. "This is our daughter Sarah," Mom would say when introductions were necessary. "She's a teacher." Then she would immediately pivot to Marcus's accomplishments, his consulting work, his promotion prospects. The wedding planning consumed my parents for months. Every conversation became about venues and caterers and guest lists. They were spending money they didn't really have, but this was their chance to host an event that would cement their place in Emma's family's social circle. "We're thinking about the Meridian Club for the reception," Mom would say over dinner. "Dr. Matthews thinks it would be perfect, and she's offered to help with the connections." $40,000. That's what they told me they were spending, and I knew it was probably more. Dad had taken out a loan against his 401k. Mom was putting deposits on credit cards. They were mortgaging their financial future for one perfect day that would prove they belonged in Emma's world. Meanwhile, my life was quietly falling apart. The back pain had started in February, right around the time Marcus announced the wedding date. I thought it was stressful at first. Teaching is physically demanding. You're on your feet all day, carrying books, setting up classrooms. I attributed the aches to my cheap shoes and long hours. But the pain kept getting worse. I started taking ibuprofen daily, then switching to stronger over-the-counter medications. I mentioned it to my parents during our weekly Sunday dinners, but wedding planning always took precedence. "Mom, I'm having some really bad back pain. I think I should see a doctor." "Probably just stress from work. You should try yoga. Emma does hot yoga at this amazing studio. Maybe you should take up something more active instead of just reading all the time." Every attempt to talk about my health was dismissed or redirected. They were so consumed with wedding preparations, so focused on impressing Emma's family, that my growing medical concerns barely registered as background noise. I started missing family dinners because sitting for long periods had become unbearable. Mom's response was annoyance, not concern. "You're missing too many family gatherings, Sarah. Emma's going to think we don't prioritize family time. What if she mentions it to her mother?" Even my pain was somehow about how it might reflect poorly on them to Emma's family. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dad worked for a medical device company, but couldn't be bothered to take his daughter's medical concerns seriously. He sold equipment to hospitals and doctors' offices every day, but when I mentioned needing to see a specialist, he dismissed it as unnecessary. Doctors just want to run expensive tests to make money. Take some aspirin and get better sleep. You're probably just sleeping wrong. By April, I was taking sick days regularly. The pain wasn't just in my back anymore. It was shooting down my legs, making it hard to stand for long periods, affecting my ability to do my job effectively. My students started noticing. "Miss Mitchell, are you okay? You look really tired. Miss Mitchell, do you need to sit down?" These 16-year-olds were showing more concern for my well-being than my own family. I finally made a doctor's appointment on my own in early May, 3 weeks before the wedding. My primary care physician, Dr. Rodriguez, took one look at my symptoms and immediately referred me to a neurologist. The neurologist ordered an MRI. I didn't tell my parents about any of this. They were deep in final wedding preparations, arguing about seating charts and flower arrangements, and whether the band was prestigious enough for Emma's family's expectations. My medical appointments felt like an intrusion on their big moment. MRI results came back on a Thursday. Dr. Rodriguez called me at school during my lunch break. "Sarah, I need you to come in immediately. We found something that requires urgent attention." I drove to the doctor's office in a daze, still thinking it might be a pinched nerve or muscle strain. Something easily treatable. Something that wouldn't interfere with anyone's wedding plans. Dr. Rodriguez had my scans pulled up on his computer screen when I arrived. I could even see the dark mass pressing against my spine. "This is a tumor, Sarah. It's growing rapidly and putting significant pressure on your spinal cord. You need to see a neurosurgeon immediately." The referral to Dr. Chen happened that same day. The consultation was scheduled for Friday. The urgent surgery recommendation came Monday. Tuesday was when I made the calls to my family, when I learned exactly where I ranked in their priorities. But sitting in that hospital bed after those devastating conversations, I started remembering other moments, other times when my needs had been secondary to Marcus's convenience or my parents' social aspirations. The pattern had been there all along. I'd just been too willing to make excuses for it, like when I was 22 and needed help moving into my first apartment. Marcus was having a pool party that weekend, so Dad couldn't help me. I hired movers with money I didn't have. Or when I was 24 and got pneumonia, missing a week of work without pay. Mom was too busy helping Marcus pick out furniture for his new place to come take care of me. Jessica brought me soup and medicine. Or, when I was 25 and finally saved enough money to take a real vacation, my first trip anywhere in years. Marcus's relationship with Emma hit a rough patch that same weekend, so our parents spent the entire time I was gone counseling him through his crisis. When I came back with pictures and stories, no one asked about my trip. Every single time, Marcus's wants had trumped my needs. Every celebration of mine had been overshadowed by his latest achievement. Every milestone in my life had been minimized while his were magnified. The spinal tumor wasn't just a medical emergency. It was the final, most dramatic example of a lifetime pattern where my well-being would always be sacrificed for Marcus's happiness. But this time was different. This time, their choice to prioritize his wedding over my surgery wasn't just emotionally devastating, it was documented. Medical professionals were witnessing their abandonment. Legal implications were already being discussed. This time, their favoritism wasn't just going to hurt my feelings. This time, it was going to cost them everything. The call from Dr. Chen came at 2:15 p.m. on a Wednesday, exactly 1 week before Marcus's wedding. I was in the middle of teaching my AP literature class, discussing the themes of betrayal in Hamlet, when my phone buzzed with the hospital's number. I never answered personal calls during class, but something made me glance at the screen twice. Class, please continue reading Act 4 while I step outside for just a moment. Dr. Chen's voice was carefully controlled, the way medical professionals speak when they're trying not to alarm you while delivering alarming news. Sarah, I've been reviewing your latest scans from this morning's follow-up MRI. The tumor has grown significantly since Monday's images. We need to move your surgery up. Immediately, my legs went weak. I was standing in the hallway outside my classroom, watching my students through the window as they bent over their books, completely unaware that their teacher's world was collapsing. How soon? This Saturday. I've already cleared my schedule and booked the OR. Sarah, I cannot stress this enough. Waiting until next week is no longer an option. The rate of growth we're seeing could result in complete loss of motor function in your lower extremities if we delay any further. Saturday. Marcus's wedding was Saturday. Dr. Chen, my brother is getting married this Saturday. It's really important to my family. The pause that followed felt eternal. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. Sarah, I understand that family events are significant, but we're talking about your ability to walk. This tumor is pressing against your spinal cord with increasing pressure every hour. By Saturday, if we don't operate, you could be paralyzed. Permanently. There is no medical scenario where waiting is advisable. I stood in that empty hallway, holding my phone with shaking hands, trying to process the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. My health versus my family's most important social event. My mobility versus their acceptance. My future versus their perfect day. What time is it on Saturday? 6 a.m. We'll need you to check in Friday evening for pre-op preparation. The surgery itself will take approximately 12 hours, and you'll be in recovery by Saturday evening if everything goes well. 12 hours. The ceremony was at 2 p.m., reception at 6. If everything went perfectly, I'd be coming out of anesthesia just as the first dance was starting. Dr. Chen, I need to ask my family to reschedule some things. Can I call you back in a few hours? Of course. But Sarah, please understand that this is not a process without their support. After hanging up, I went back into my classroom and somehow managed to finish teaching the period. But my mind wasn't on Hamlet's betrayal by his mother and uncle. It was in the conversation I was about to have with my own family, the one where I would finally ask them to choose me over their social ambitions. Guest, this is a medical emergency. If your family cannot adjust their plans, you'll need to call my mother first during my planning period. Mom, I need to talk to you about something urgent. The doctor called today. Oh, honey, can it wait? I'm at the bridal salon with Emma and her mother for the final dress fitting. Dr. Matthews is helping us pick out jewelry for the ceremony, and we're having such a lovely time. The background chatter of women cooing over satin and pearls made my medical emergency feel even more surreal. Mom, my surgery has been moved up to this Saturday. The tumor is growing faster than they expected. The line went quiet, except for the distant sound of Emma asking someone about hemline adjustments. Sarah, this Saturday is Marcus's wedding. You know that. We've been planning this for 18 months. I know, but the doctor says if I don't have this surgery immediately, I could be paralyzed. Mom, I could lose the ability to walk. Well, surely they can do it the following week. Doctors reschedule surgeries all the time. This is Marcus's wedding day. It's the most important day of his life. The most important day of his life. Not our lives, not the family's celebration, but his day specifically. And apparently more important than my spine. The doctor was very clear that waiting another week could cause permanent paralysis. This isn't something that can be rescheduled, Mom. Hold on, let me step outside so we can talk privately. I heard her excusing herself, the sound of heels, clicking across marble floors, then a door closing. Sarah, you have to understand our position here. We've already spent $37,000 on this wedding. The venue is booked, the caterer is confirmed, the flowers are ordered. Emma's family has invited over 200 people. Some of them are flying in from across the country. $37,000. She said it like it was more than my life was worth. What exactly are you asking me to do? Not have surgery and risk paralysis so I can attend a party? Don't be dramatic. It's not just a party. It's your brother's wedding. And you're not going to be paralyzed. Doctors always exaggerate these things to scare people into expensive procedures. Mom, this is Dr. Chen at Ohio State Medical Center. She's the head of neurosurgery. She's not trying to scam me. Well, get a second opinion then. Call around to other doctors. Surely someone else can tell you it's not as urgent as this Chen person is claiming. I closed my eyes and tried to find patience I didn't have. There isn't time for a second opinion. The surgery needs to happen Saturday, or I could lose feeling in my legs forever. Sarah, you're being selfish. This day isn't about you. Marcus has been planning this wedding for over a year. Emma's family has put enormous effort and money into making this perfect. You can't just decide to have surgery on the same day and expect everyone to drop everything for you. Selfish? I was being selfish for having a medical emergency. I didn't decide to have surgery, Mom. I decided to not be paralyzed. You're being overdramatic. If it was really that serious, why didn't they find it sooner? You've been complaining about back pain for months. It's probably just stress or poor posture from all that reading you do. The dismissal in her voice was like a slap. Months of pain that had progressively worsened. Months of me mentioning my concerns during family dinners. Months of being told it was nothing serious. Now that it was proven to be very serious, somehow that was my fault too. I'm going to call Dad and Marcus. Maybe they'll understand. Your father is at work, and Marcus is dealing with last-minute wedding stress. Emma's maid of honor had to drop out because of some family emergency, and now they're scrambling to reorganize the bridal party. The last thing he needs is more drama from you. More drama. My potential paralysis was just drama compared to rearranging a bridal party. I hung up and immediately called my father's office. Mitchell Medical Sales. This is Bob speaking. Dad, it's Sarah. I need to talk to you about something urgent. Hey, sweetheart, make it quick. I'm about to head into a big presentation with the hospital administrator at Riverside. I explained the situation as concisely as possible. The moved-up surgery date, the risk of paralysis, the unavoidable conflict with the wedding. Dad was quiet for a long moment before responding. Sarah, this puts us in a really difficult position. We're not just talking about Marcus's feelings here. We're talking about our relationship with Emma's family. Dr. Matthews has already introduced me to some potential clients. Emma's father mentioned possibly investing in some medical device ventures. This wedding isn't just a party for us, it's a business opportunity. A business opportunity. My spine surgery was interfering with Dad's networking plans. Dad, I could end up in a wheelchair. Now don't catastrophize. These doctors always present worst-case scenarios to cover themselves legally. I work with medical professionals every day. I know how they operate. They probably just want to get you into surgery quickly to maximize their billing. The irony of my father, who sold medical equipment for a living, Questioning medical expertise wasn't lost on me. This is Dr. Chen at Ohio State. She doesn't need to manufacture emergencies for money, Dad. Look, here's what we'll do. I'll call my contact. At Riverside, Dr. Johnson in orthopedics. He owes me a favor. I'll have him look at your scans and give us a real timeline, not this rush nonsense. There isn't time for that. The surgery needs to happen on Saturday. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. Marcus's wedding is this Saturday. Our entire family will be there. Emma's entire family will be there. Some very important people will be there. We cannot just abandon our responsibilities because you're having some back problems. Back problems. The same dismissive language my mother had used. Dad, I'm not asking you to abandon anything. I'm asking you to support me through major surgery. And we will support you. Next week. Get the surgery rescheduled for the following Saturday. I'm sure this Dr. Chen will understand once you explain the circumstances. She already explained that waiting another week could cause permanent paralysis. Then get a different doctor, one who's more flexible with scheduling. I realized I was having a conversation with someone who fundamentally didn't believe my medical emergency was real. Despite working in the medical field, despite knowing how serious spinal tumors could be, my father was choosing to believe that multiple doctors at a prestigious medical center were either lying or incompetent, rather than accepting that his daughter's surgery couldn't be rescheduled around his social calendar. The final call was to Marcus. Maybe, I thought, maybe he would be different. Maybe the brother who used to sneak me cookies when I was grounded would remember that family meant more than a party. Sarah, hey, Emma and I are just leaving the venue after doing a final walkthrough. Everything looks amazing. You're going to love what they've done with the flower arrangements. Marcus, I need to tell you something important about Saturday. Explained the situation for the third time that day, each repetition making it feel more surreal. Marcus was quiet for a long time. I could hear Emma asking him something in the background, heard him covering the phone to respond to her. Sarah, this is really bad timing. Bad timing. Like I had chosen when to develop a spinal tumor. I know the timing is terrible, but I don't have a choice. Look, I understand you're scared, but you have to see this from our perspective. Emma's family has put incredible effort into this wedding. Her mother has called in favors from all over the state to make this perfect. We can't just tell 200 guests that the wedding is postponed because my sister decided to have surgery. I decided to have surgery, as if it were an elective cosmetic procedure. Marcus, I could be paralyzed if I wait. Come on, doctors always say dramatic things like that. Remember when you had that appendicitis scare in college and the doctor said, it might rupture, but then it turned out to be nothing? That had been food poisoning, not appendicitis. And it had happened to Marcus, not me. But apparently, in his mind, all medical concerns were equivalent and equally dismissible. This is different. They found a tumor on my spine. So get it removed. Next week. What's 7 days going to matter? The doctor says 7 days could be the difference between walking and being in a wheelchair. Sarah, you're being really dramatic right now. If it was that serious, they would have found it months ago when you first started complaining. This just sounds like doctors trying to scare you into expensive surgery. I was losing my mind. Every single member of my family was dismissing the medical expertise of multiple doctors, the urgency of neurosurgery, the reality of my potential paralysis, all because it conflicted with their party plans. Marcus, I'm your sister. I've supported you through everything. I was there when you failed calculus and needed tutoring. I was there when you broke up with your college girlfriend. I was there when you were stressed about job interviews. I've never asked you for anything major. I'm asking you now. Please understand that I need to have this surgery on Saturday. The pause stretched uncomfortably long. Sarah, here's the thing. Emma and I have been talking, and we think you might be having some kind of anxiety response to the wedding. Like, maybe subconsciously you're creating a medical crisis because you're jealous of the attention I'm getting. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. You think I gave myself a spinal tumor because I'm jealous of your wedding? not gave yourself. But maybe you're exaggerating the symptoms, or maybe the doctors are picking up on your anxiety and overreacting. Emma's cousin is a therapist, and she says family members sometimes develop psychosomatic illnesses during major family events. They had psychoanalyzed my tumor. Based on the expertise of Emma's cousin, they had determined that my spinal mass was actually a psychological manifestation of sibling rivalry. Marcus, I have MRI scans showing a tumor pressing against my spinal cord. Yeah, but doctors can misinterpret those things. Maybe it's just inflammation that looks like a tumor. Maybe it's been there for years and isn't actually growing. The point is, this doesn't have to be an emergency that ruins our wedding day. Our wedding day. He said it like I was supposed to be equally invested in his marriage to someone who apparently thought I was psychologically unstable. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm trying to avoid being paralyzed. Look, here's what we'll do. Come to the wedding Saturday. If you're still feeling bad afterward, we'll help you get a second opinion from a doctor who isn't so quick to recommend surgery. Emma's family knows some excellent physicians who take a more conservative approach. A more conservative approach to spinal tumors pressing on nerves that controlled my ability to walk. Marcus, if I wait until after your wedding, I might never walk again. You're catastrophizing. You've always been prone to worst-case scenario thinking. Remember when you thought you failed that teaching exam and it turned out you got one of, the highest scores in the state? Another memory that belonged to him, not me. But in Marcus's world, all experiences were interchangeable as long as they supported his current argument. That's when it finally hit me. I wasn't talking to people who disagreed with my medical decisions. I wasn't talking to people who were weighing difficult competing priorities. I was talking to people who simply didn't believe me. Despite MRI scans, despite multiple doctors, despite detailed medical explanations, my family had decided that my spinal tumor was either fake, exaggerated, or somehow my fault. They had chosen to believe that neurosurgeons at a major medical center were either lying or incompetent, rather than accept that my medical emergency was real and urgent. And they had made this choice because believing me would require them to make a sacrifice they weren't willing to make. The wedding was more important than my health. Their social status was more important than my mobility. Their perfect day was more important than my future. That night, I called Dr. Chen's office and confirmed the Saturday morning surgery. I'll be there alone, I told her nurse. My family has other commitments. The nurse was quiet for a moment, before responding gently, Sarah, that's more common than you might think. Sometimes families have difficulty processing medical emergencies, but you're making the right choice. Dr. Chen is one of the best neurosurgeons in the Midwest. After hanging up, I sat in my small apartment and felt something shift inside me. For 26 years, I had tried to earn my family's love and approval. I had accepted being second place, third place, last place in their priorities. I had made excuses for their favoritism, rationalized their dismissiveness, minimized my own needs to accommodate theirs. But this time, they weren't just hurting my feelings or damaging my self-esteem. This time, their rejection could cost me my ability to walk, and suddenly I realized I was done asking for their love. I was done trying to earn my place in a family that had already decided I didn't matter enough to sacrifice a party for. Saturday morning, I would have surgery to save my spine. Saturday evening, they would dance at Marcus's wedding. And after that, we would all live with the consequences of the choices we had made. The first revelation came at 11:23 p.m. on Thursday night, exactly 36 hours before my surgery. I couldn't sleep, so I was scrolling through my phone when a Facebook notification popped up. Marcus had posted a photo from his bachelor party earlier that evening. Him and his groomsmen at some upscale steakhouse in Cincinnati, all raising champagne glasses and grinning. The caption read, "Last night of freedom with my boys. Thanks to my amazing parents for picking up the tab at Morton's." Nothing but the best for the future Mr. and Mrs. Matthews Mitchell. Bachelor party. Family. Blessed Morton Steakhouse. I looked it up quickly. Dinner for 8 people there would easily cost over $1,000. My parents, who claimed they couldn't possibly consider rescheduling a wedding they'd spent $37,000 on, had just dropped. Another grand on a bachelor party dinner less than 2 days before my spinal surgery. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the hyphenated name, Matthews Mitchell. Marcus was taking Emma's name too? When had that been decided? And why was this the first I was hearing about it? I called my mother immediately, not caring about the late hour. Sarah? What's wrong? Why are you calling so late? Mom, Marcus posted something about being the future Mr. and Mrs. Matthews Mitchell. Is he hyphenating his name? There was a pause, the kind that confirmed I'd stumbled onto something they hadn't planned to tell me. Well, yes. Emma's family felt it was important to continue the Matthews family name, given Dr. Matthews's professional reputation and their family's standing in the community. So Marcus is giving up the Mitchell name? Not giving up, adding to it. It's quite modern, actually. Dr. Matthews suggested it, and we thought it was a wonderful idea. Dr. Matthews suggested it. Emma's mother had suggested that my brother abandon our family name in favor of hers, and my parents had agreed. The same parents who were too invested in impressing the Matthews family to reschedule a wedding for their daughter's emergency surgery. Mom, did it occur to you that this might mean they don't actually respect our family very much? If they're asking Marcus to take their name instead of keeping ours? Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. It shows how much they value him that they want him to be part of their family legacy. Dr. Matthews said Marcus has the kind of character they'd be proud to have associated with the Matthews name. The Matthews name. Not our name. The name I shared with my parents. The name that apparently wasn't good enough for my brother's new life. What about our family legacy? What about Dad's name? Your father is thrilled about it. He says it shows. Marcus is moving up in the world, making important connections. The Matthews family has been prominent in Ohio for 3 generations. I hung up feeling sick, but not from my medical condition. My parents were so desperate to climb the social ladder through Marcus's marriage that they were celebrating him, abandoning our family name. And they were doing it while refusing to support me through surgery that could determine whether I'd walk again. But the name change was just the beginning. Friday morning, I was at the hospital for pre-surgery preparation, when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my best friend and the only person who knew about both my surgery and my family's response. Sarah, you need to see this. Your mom posted on Facebook. She sent me a screenshot. My mother had shared a photo of herself getting her hair done at some expensive salon with the caption, "Getting pampered before the most important day of our lives." Our son Marcus is marrying the love of his life tomorrow, and we couldn't be more blessed. The Matthews family has welcomed us with open arms, and we're so grateful to be part of such an amazing celebration. Proud parents. Wedding weekend. Blessed. Family posted 2 hours ago, while I was checking into the hospital for surgery, but what made it worse were the comments. Dozens of congratulations from family friends, neighbors, people from their church. Everyone was talking about how excited they must be, how beautiful the wedding would be, how lucky they were to have such a successful son. Not one person asked about me. Not one person mentioned that the Mitchell family had another child. Until my mother's public narrative about the most important day of our lives, I simply didn't exist. I scrolled through more of her recent posts. Photo after photo of wedding preparations, Marcus and Emma, the engagement party, bridal showers. All tagged with thanked family, but none of them included me. In my mother's social media world, their family consisted of 3 people, her, Dad, and Marcus. Then I found something that stopped my heart. A post from 3 weeks ago, right around the time I'd first told them about my back pain getting worse. Mom had shared an article about adult children who create drama during family celebrations, with the comment, Some people just can't handle when the spotlight isn't on them. Thankfully, our family knows how to prioritize what really matters. Drama. Family are priorities. She had posted this the day after I'd called her crying about not being able to sleep because of the pain in my back. I kept scrolling, my nausea growing with each post. Here was another one from last month. When some people in your family try to make everything about them, you learn to focus on the ones who bring joy instead of stress. Grateful, positive vibes, family. Posted the same day I'd asked if they could help me find a good doctor for my back pain. My mother had been publicly portraying me as attention-seeking and dramatic for weeks, even as my medical condition was deteriorating. She had been building a narrative on social media that positioned my health concerns as selfish attempts to steal attention from Marcus's wedding. The pattern went back months. Post after post about Marcus's achievements, his relationship, the wedding planning. Occasional mentions of being blessed with family who understand priorities and grateful for children who support each other instead of competing. But here's what I found that changed everything. Buried in the comments of one of her posts about wedding expenses, someone had asked how they were managing to afford such an elaborate celebration. Mom's response: "We're so blessed that our children are independent and successful. Sarah's been helping with some of the expenses because she wants her brother's day to be perfect." I read it 3 times before it sank in. She was telling people I was helping pay for the wedding. I had never given them a penny for Marcus's wedding. I had never offered to help with expenses. I was a teacher living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to afford my own basic needs while they spent $40,000 on a party. But apparently, in Mom's version of reality, I was a generous sister, sacrificing my own money to make Marcus's dreams come true. I called my bank immediately and asked them to check my account for any unauthorized transactions. It took 20 minutes for them to complete the review. "Miss Mitchell, I'm showing a withdrawal of $1,500 from your checking account on April 3rd. The transaction was processed at First National Bank of Westerville with a signature authorization. April 3rd. I'd been at school that day, teaching. I'd never been to that bank branch in my life. What kind of signature authorization? It shows as an in-person withdrawal with physical signature verification. But Miss Mitchell, I should mention that we've had some concerns about this transaction. The signature on file doesn't quite match your other banking signatures. We flagged it for potential fraud review, but then we received a call from someone claiming to be you, confirming the transaction was legitimate. Someone claiming to be me. Someone who had forged my signature and then called the bank pretending to be me to cover their tracks. Can you tell me what phone number called to confirm the transaction?" After checking their records, the representative gave me a number I recognized immediately. It was my mother's cell phone. I hung up and immediately called the fraud department to report the theft. They put a hold on my account and opened an investigation. Then I called my credit card companies to check for any unauthorized activity. That's when I found the second theft. My Visa card showed a charge for $2,800 to Elegant Events Catering on March 15th. The same catering company handled Marcus's wedding reception. I'd never authorized that charge. I'd never even heard of that catering company before this moment. When I called Visa to dispute the charge, they told me it had been processed as a phone transaction with full card details and security information. Someone had called the catering company, provided my complete credit card information, and paid for part of Marcus's wedding with my money. The customer service representative walked me through the details of the transaction. The charge had been made from a phone number I recognized, my father's work number at the medical device company. They had stolen over $4,000 from me to pay for Marcus's wedding. While telling me they couldn't afford to reschedule anything because of how much money they'd already invested, they had been secretly stealing my money to fund their investment. But the financial theft was just the surface level. I spent the next few hours sitting in my hospital bed with my laptop, diving deeper into what they'd been doing behind my back. I checked my credit report and found something that made my hands shake. A credit inquiry from a luxury car dealership in Cincinnati dated 2 weeks ago. An inquiry made using my social security number and personal information for someone looking to buy a BMW. I called the dealership immediately. "Oh yes, Miss Mitchell," the salesperson said when I identified myself. "Your brother Marcus was here with your parents looking at the 3 Series. They said you were co-signing the loan as a wedding gift. Beautiful gesture, by the way. The financing came through perfectly." Marcus had bought a new BMW, using my credit as the co-signer, without my knowledge or permission. A car I'd never seen, for a wedding gift I'd never agreed to give, using financial credentials they'd stolen from me. I never co-signed anything. I've never been to your dealership. The silence on the other end was uncomfortable. "Miss Mitchell, I have the paperwork right here. Your signature is on the co-signer documents." Another forged signature. Another case of identity theft. The salesperson walked me through the details. My parents had brought in documents showing my income, my credit score, and my employment verification. They had presented themselves as my representatives, with power of attorney to handle my financial affairs. I had never given them power of attorney. I had never authorized them to access my financial information. But somehow they had convincing documentation that allowed them to use my credit to buy Marcus a car. "What address did you have on file for me?" I asked. "Let me check. It shows your current address as 1247 Maple Street, Westerville." My parents' address. They had listed me as living at their house, making it easier to forge documents and claim they had access to my mail and financial information. By Friday evening, I had uncovered a systematic pattern of financial fraud that went back over a year. They had stolen money from my bank account, charged thousands of dollars to my credit cards, used my identity to co-sign for Marcus's car loan, and created false documentation to access my financial information. The total amount stolen was over $12,000. Money they had used to fund Marcus's lifestyle and wedding while claiming they couldn't afford to make any changes to accommodate my medical emergency. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing how long they had been planning this. The first fraudulent transaction was dated 13 months ago, right around the time Marcus announced his engagement. They had been systematically stealing from me to fund his wedding for over a year, while simultaneously treating me like an ungrateful burden for asking for any kind of support. Every time I'd mentioned struggling with bills, every time I'd said I couldn't afford something, every time they'd acted like I was irresponsible with money, they had been stealing thousands of dollars from me behind my back. The back pain that had been getting progressively worse over the past few months? I couldn't afford physical therapy or proper medical care because they were draining my accounts to pay for Marcus's wedding. Dr. Chen came by for a final pre-surgery consultation at 8 p.m. "How are you feeling, Sarah? Any questions about tomorrow's procedure?" "Dr. Chen, I need to ask you something. If someone was preventing a patient from getting necessary medical care, like pressuring them to delay emergency surgery, would that be considered a form of abuse?" She sat down in the chair beside my bed, her expression serious. "Sarah, are you telling me someone is pressuring you to delay this surgery?" "My family wants me to reschedule so I don't miss my brother's wedding, even after you explained the paralysis risk." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, what you're describing could be considered medical neglect, which is a form of abuse. When family members interfere with someone's access to necessary medical care, especially emergency care, there can be legal implications." "What kind of legal implications?" "Well, if someone has power of attorney or guardianship, they can face charges for medical neglect. But even without legal authority, deliberately preventing someone from accessing emergency medical care could be considered reckless endangerment or even assault if it results in injury." She paused, studying my face carefully. "Sarah, is there something else you need to tell me? because if your family is doing anything beyond just expressing their preferences about timing, I need to know. I told her about the financial fraud I'd discovered. The stolen money, the forged signatures, the identity theft. How they had been funding Marcus's wedding with money stolen from me while claiming they couldn't afford to accommodate my medical needs. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting, taking notes on her tablet. Sarah, what you're describing is serious. Criminal activity. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, these are felonies. And the fact that they're using stolen funds to pay for an event they're prioritizing over your emergency medical care creates an even more serious legal situation. What do you mean? Well, they're essentially committing crimes to fund an event that they consider more important than preventing your potential paralysis. A prosecutor could argue that shows deliberate indifference to your welfare, possibly even criminal negligence. She was quiet for another moment, then looked at me directly. Sarah, I'm required to report suspected abuse to the appropriate authorities. What you've told me tonight constitutes both financial abuse and medical neglect. I need to file a report with Adult Protective Services. My head was spinning. In the span of a few hours, I had gone from discovering some stolen money to learning that my family's behavior constituted multiple felonies and reportable abuse. What happens when you file that report? APS will open an investigation. They'll examine the financial crimes, the medical neglect, and determine whether charges should be filed. Given the severity of what you've described, the amount of money involved, the forged documents, the interference with emergency medical care, this will likely be referred to law enforcement as well. That night, as I lay in my hospital bed preparing for surgery the next morning, I realized that my family's choice to prioritize Marcus's wedding over my medical emergency had exposed something much larger and darker than simple favoritism. They hadn't just been emotionally neglecting me for years. They had been systematically stealing from me, committing identity theft, and using the stolen funds to support Marcus's lifestyle while I struggled financially, and when their crimes were about to be exposed by my medical crisis, when I needed their stolen money for my own health care, they had chosen to risk my permanent disability rather than admit what they'd done. Tomorrow, I will have surgery to save my spine. But tonight, I was documenting everything that would save my future. From the people who were supposed to love me most. The investigation was already beginning. And this time, I wasn't the one who would need saving. My surgery was scheduled for 6 a.m. Saturday morning. At 4:47 a.m., while I was being prepped for the operating room, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Still time to change your mind. The ceremony isn't until 2 p.m. You could probably reschedule for next week and still make it to the reception. Even as I was being wheeled toward 12 hours of spinal surgery that could determine whether I'd ever walk again, my brother was still trying to convince me to risk paralysis for his party. Turned off my phone and handed it to the nurse. When I wake up, I told her, everything is going to be different. She probably thought I was talking about my surgery. I wasn't. The surgery took 14 hours instead of 12. When I woke up in recovery at 8:23 p.m., the first thing I did was wiggle my toes. I could feel them. Dr. Chen had saved my ability to walk. The second thing I did was check my phone. 17 missed calls from my mother, 43 unread text messages, and a voicemail that made my blood run cold. Sarah, you've completely ruined Marcus's wedding day. Emma's family is asking where you are, and we don't know what to tell them. Everyone keeps asking about our daughter, and we have to pretend everything is fine while you're off being dramatic at some hospital. You've embarrassed us in front of the most important people in our lives. I hope you're happy. They were, at the reception. While I was in surgery fighting for my mobility, they were dancing and making excuses for my absence. While I was under anesthesia having a tumor removed from my spine, they were schmoozing with Emma's family and pretending I didn't exist. But Dr. Chen had filed her report with Adult Protective Services on Friday evening, and by Saturday morning, While I was in surgery, investigators were already making phone calls. My phone had missed calls from Detective Amanda Rodriguez with the Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit, a callback number for APS investigator Michael Thompson, and a message from a victim's advocate named Sarah Chen, no relation to my doctor, who specialized in family financial abuse cases. Recovery would take weeks, but building my case started immediately. Sunday morning, Detective Rodriguez came to my hospital room with a laptop bag and a digital recorder. "Miss Mitchell, I'm going to be direct with you. What your family did constitutes multiple felonies. We're talking about identity theft, bank fraud, credit card fraud, forgery, and potentially conspiracy charges if we can prove they worked together on this." She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately made me feel like I was being taken seriously. "I've reviewed the documentation you provided to APS, and I've already contacted your bank and credit card companies for additional records. But I need you to walk me through everything from the beginning, and I need you to be prepared for what comes next." What came next, she explained, was a full-scale financial investigation that would examine every transaction, every document, every piece of evidence related to the fraud. But more than that, it was going to be very public very quickly. When we execute search warrants for financial crimes, especially ones involving forged documents and identity theft, it makes news. Your family is going to know they're under investigation, probably within the next few days. Detective Rodriguez spent 3 hours with me that Sunday, documenting every detail of the financial fraud I'd discovered. But she also asked questions I hadn't considered. "Sarah, you mentioned that your parents told people you were helping pay for the wedding. Do you have any evidence of them making those claims publicly?" I showed her my mother's Facebook posts, the comments about me being a generous sister who was helping with expenses. "This is important because it shows they were using false statements about your financial contributions to enhance their social status. That could add fraud and defamation charges to the list." She also asked about my medical expenses and how the stolen money had affected my ability to seek treatment. "You said you couldn't afford physical therapy or proper medical care because of financial struggles. If we can prove that their theft directly delayed your medical treatment, which then led to a more serious medical emergency, that could elevate this to aggravated felony charges." I'd never thought about it that way, but she was right. The money they'd stolen was money I could have used for better medical care earlier, potentially preventing the tumor from growing to the point where emergency surgery was necessary. "Detective Rodriguez, can I ask you something? What made APS and your department take this so seriously so quickly?" She looked up from her notes. "Honestly, it's the combination of factors. Financial abuse of family members is common, but it's usually smaller amounts over longer periods. Identity theft is serious, but it's often by strangers. Medical neglect happens, but it's usually involving elderly parents or young children." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "What your family did hits all 3 categories simultaneously, involving substantial amounts of money, sophisticated fraud methods, and deliberate interference with emergency medical care. Plus, the fact that they were using stolen funds to pay for an event they prioritized over preventing your potential paralysis shows a level of callousness that prosecutors love to present to juries." Monday morning brought Michael Thompson, the APS investigator, who had a different focus. "Sarah, my job is to determine whether you were in immediate danger and whether that danger is ongoing, based on what you've told us and what we've discovered. In our preliminary investigation, I'm recommending that you be granted an emergency protective order." "A protective order? Against my own family?" I know it sounds extreme, but they've demonstrated a willingness to commit serious crimes against you and to prioritize their social interests over your physical safety. Given that they have access to your personal information and have already used it to commit identity theft, we need to prevent them from having any further access to your financial or medical information. Thompson explained that the protective order would prevent my parents from contacting me directly, accessing any of my accounts, or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. It would also alert all of my financial institutions and medical providers that they were not authorized to receive any information about me. But here's the thing, Sarah. Once we file for this protective order, it becomes part of the public record. Anyone can look it up online. Your family's friends, neighbors, coworkers. They'll all be able to see that Robert and Linda Mitchell are subject to a protective order for financial abuse and medical neglect. The social embarrassment that would cause my status-obsessed parents was almost poetic justice. Tuesday brought victims advocate Sarah Chen, who helped me understand the bigger picture of what was happening. Sarah, what you're dealing with is called systematic family financial abuse, and it's more common than people realize. But what makes your case unusual is how sophisticated the fraud was, and how it escalated to medical neglect. She explained that most family financial abuse involves smaller amounts of money, taken opportunistically. What my parents had done required planning, coordination, and sophisticated knowledge of banking and credit systems. The fact that they were able to forge convincing signatures, access your credit information, and create false documentation suggests this wasn't impulsive behavior. This was a carefully planned scheme that they implemented over more than a year. But she also warned me about what was coming. When families like yours are exposed for this kind of systematic abuse, they don't usually accept responsibility. They typically go into crisis mode, trying to control the narrative and minimize their legal exposure. You need to be prepared for them to claim you're lying, exaggerating, or somehow responsible for what happened. She was right. The first attempt at narrative control came Tuesday evening. Marcus called the hospital directly, somehow getting through to my room despite the protective order. Sarah, what the hell have you done? The police showed up at Mom and Dad's house with search warrants. They took boxes of documents, their computers, and their phones. The neighbors saw everything. Emma's family is asking questions we can't answer. Marcus? They stole over $12,000 from me to pay for your wedding. That's not stealing. They were helping you contribute to family expenses. You always said you wanted to help but couldn't afford it. They were just making sure you could be part of making the wedding special. The gaslighting was breathtaking. They had rewritten history so completely that Marcus genuinely seemed to believe that stealing my money was actually a favor they were doing for me. Marcus, they forged my signature and used my identity without permission. That's identity theft. They were acting on your behalf because you were too stressed about work to handle the financial arrangements yourself. Mom said you asked her to take care of the wedding contributions so you wouldn't have to worry about it. I was talking to someone who lived in a completely different reality, one where financial crimes were acts of family service and identity theft was helpful delegation. But the call gave me something unexpected. Evidence. I was recording the conversation on my phone, and Marcus had just admitted that our parents had taken money from my accounts, used my identity for financial transactions, and done it all without my explicit consent. He thought he was defending them, but he was actually confessing to multiple felonies on a recorded line. Wednesday brought the first legal strategy meeting with attorney Catherine Walsh, a specialist in financial crimes and family abuse cases. Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of systematic family financial abuse I've seen in 15 years of practice. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. She explained that we were dealing with multiple types of legal action simultaneously. Criminal charges filed by the state, civil recovery lawsuits to reclaim stolen money and damages, and the protective order proceedings. The criminal case is out of our hands now. That's between the state prosecutor and your family's defense attorneys. But we can file civil suits for the stolen money, plus damages for emotional distress, medical complications caused by delayed treatment, and punitive damages for the deliberate nature of their actions. She also explained something I hadn't considered: the ripple effects. Sarah, when this goes to trial, and it will go to trial because your family has too much to lose, to accept a plea deal quietly, it's going to be very public. Financial fraud cases involving substantial amounts of money and family members make news. Your family's behavior is going to be exposed in detail. That exposure would include not just the financial crimes, but the wedding prioritization, the medical neglect, the systematic favoritism, and Marcus's name change to ingratiate himself with Emma's family. Everything is going to come out. Their social climbing, their willingness to risk your paralysis for a party, the way they've treated you as secondary to Marcus for your entire life. It's all going to be part of the public record. Thursday brought unexpected allies. Dr. Rodriguez from my teaching job called my hospital room. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind, but when you didn't return to work Monday and I couldn't reach you, I called the emergency contact number you listed. Your parents. The woman who answered told me you were off being dramatic about some minor back surgery and hung up on me. She had called my parents to check on my welfare, and they had dismissed my spinal tumor surgery as dramatic attention-seeking. I was concerned enough that I called Ohio State Medical Center directly and spoke with Dr. Chen. Sarah, I had no idea you'd been dealing with a spinal tumor or that you'd been struggling financially. I want you to know that the entire school district is behind you." Dr. Rodriguez explained that when word got out about my situation, a beloved teacher who had been financially abused by her family while dealing with a serious medical condition, the response had been overwhelming. "We've started a fund to help with your medical expenses and recovery costs. In 3 days, we've raised over $8,000. Parents, students, other teachers, everyone wants to help. But more than the money, she offered something. Even more valuable, documentation. Sarah, I've been your principal for 4 years. I've watched you struggle financially, turn down school trips you couldn't afford, work extra jobs to make ends meet. I have records of you requesting advances on your salary, documentation of the financial stress you've been under. If you need character witnesses or evidence of how their theft affected your life, I have 4 years of employment records that tell the story." Friday brought the most important piece of the puzzle: Jessica's investigative work. My best friend had spent the week doing something I couldn't do from my hospital bed: social media investigation. "Sarah, you need to see what I found on Emma's family's social media accounts." She brought her laptop and showed me posts from the wedding weekend. Photos of the ceremony, the reception, the dancing, the celebration. But what caught my attention were the comments. Under a photo of Marcus and Emma cutting the cake, someone had asked, "Where's Marcus's sister? I thought he had a sister." Emma's response, "Oh, Sarah couldn't make it. She had some kind of medical appointment or something. She's always been a bit high maintenance about health stuff." Medical appointment. She had described my emergency spinal tumor surgery as a medical appointment, but Jessica had found something even more damaging. Look at this post from Dr. Matthews. Emma's mother had posted a photo of herself with my parents at the reception, with the caption, "So grateful to celebrate with Bob and Linda Mitchell, who raised such a wonderful son." It takes special parents to instill the kind of values that put family first. Marcus is exactly the kind of man we'd want our daughter to marry. Posted at 9:47 p.m. Saturday night. Exactly 1 hour and 24 minutes after I'd woken up from surgery. Dr. Matthews was praising my parents for raising a son who put family first, while I was in post-surgical recovery after they'd chosen his party over my medical emergency. "But here's the really interesting part," Jessica continued. "I found posts from other wedding guests talking about how expensive everything was, how impressed they were with the Mitchell family's generosity, how Marcus was lucky to have parents who could afford such an elaborate celebration." The guests were impressed by the Mitchell family's wealth and generosity. Wealth and generosity funded with money stolen from me. By Friday evening, I had assembled a team of professionals, a mountain of evidence, and a legal strategy that went far beyond simple financial recovery. Detective Rodriguez had enough evidence for multiple felony charges. Attorney Walsh had enough documentation for substantial civil damages. APS investigator Thompson had enough proof for criminal neglect charges, and I had enough recorded conversations and social media evidence to prove systematic abuse and deliberate medical endangerment. But most importantly, I had something my family didn't expect: the moral high ground and public sympathy. They had gambled everything on maintaining their social status and keeping their crimes hidden. They had assumed I would quietly accept their abuse rather than risk embarrassing the family publicly. They were about to learn how badly they had miscalculated. Because while they were dancing at Marcus's wedding, funded with stolen money, I was building a case that would destroy everything they cared about: their reputation, their social standing, their financial security, and their freedom. The surgery saved my spine, but the legal case I was building would save my future from the people who had tried to sacrifice it for a party. The first domino fell on Monday morning, exactly 10 days after my surgery. Detective Rodriguez called me at 7:23 a.m. with news that made my recovery infinitely easier. "Sarah, we executed arrest warrants this morning. Your parents are both in custody on multiple felony charges: identity theft, bank fraud, credit card fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Your brother Marcus has been charged as an accessory after the fact for his role in receiving stolen property and attempting to conceal the crimes." I was sitting in my apartment, still moving carefully because of my surgical incisions, when reality hit me. My parents were in jail. Marcus was facing felony charges. The family that had abandoned me during emergency surgery was now facing the consequences of years of systematic theft. What happens next? Arraignment is scheduled for Wednesday morning. Given the amount of money involved and the sophisticated nature of the fraud, the prosecutor is requesting significant bail amounts. Your parents are looking at potential prison sentences of 5 to 15 years each if convicted on all charges. 5 to 15 years. The wedding they'd prioritized over my health could cost them a decade of their freedom, but the arrest was just the beginning of their downfall. By Tuesday morning, the local newspaper had picked up the story. The headline read, "Westerville couple arrested for stealing from daughter to fund son's wedding." The article included details about the amount stolen, the medical emergency they'd ignored, and the fact that the wedding had cost over $40,000 while I'd been struggling to afford basic medical care. The story went viral locally. Within hours, my mother's Facebook page, which had been full of wedding photos and social climbing posts just days earlier, was suddenly flooded with comments from neighbors, church members, and family friends expressing shock and disgust. "Linda, is this true? Did you really steal money from Sarah? I can't believe you chose a party over your daughter's surgery. What kind of mother does that? No wonder Sarah wasn't at the wedding. She was in the hospital while you were dancing with stolen money." But the social media response was nothing compared to what happened to Marcus and Emma. Jessica called me Tuesday afternoon with an update that was almost too perfect to believe. "Sarah, you need to know what's happening with Marcus's job. My cousin works at the consulting firm where he's employed, and apparently the managing partners called an emergency meeting yesterday. Marcus worked for Hartwell and Associates, one of Cincinnati's most prestigious consulting firms, where reputation and client trust were everything. The firm's biggest client is Ohio Medical Systems, the hospital group your dad was trying to sell medical equipment to through connections he made at the wedding. When the fraud charges became public, Ohio Medical Systems immediately contacted Hartwell, asking if they were aware that one of their consultants was connected to a family involved in financial crimes. The irony was breathtaking. The business connections my father had been hoping to make through Marcus's wedding were now the very relationships destroying Marcus's career. They placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. But Sarah, it gets worse. Emma's law firm is also reconsidering her position because of the negative publicity. Emma worked at Matthews, Patterson and Associates, her mother's law firm. The same Dr. Matthews who had been so instrumental in orchestrating the wedding that my parents had prioritized over my surgery. Apparently, Some of their clients have been asking questions about whether the firm's associates can be trusted if they're connected to families involved in financial fraud. Dr. Matthews is furious because her daughter's marriage is now affecting the family business. Wednesday morning brought the arraignment, which I attended virtually from my laptop while continuing my recovery at home. Watching my parents stand before a judge in orange jumpsuits, being read charges that could result in decades in prison, felt surreal. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Torres, laid out the case methodically. Your Honor, the defendants systematically stole over $12,000 from their daughter over a period of 13 months, using sophisticated fraud techniques including forged signatures, identity theft, and false documentation. They used these stolen funds to finance their son's wedding while simultaneously pressuring the victim to delay emergency surgery that was necessary to prevent permanent paralysis. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed the charges with an expression of obvious disgust. Let me understand this correctly. The defendants stole money from their daughter to pay for their son's wedding, then asked their daughter to risk permanent disability, so as not to interfere with that wedding? That's correct, Your Honor. The judge set bail at $50,000 each for my parents and $25,000 for Marcus, amounts they couldn't afford, especially since their bank accounts had been frozen as part of the fraud investigation. They spent the next 3 days in jail before Emma's family posted bail, money that came with strings attached that would soon unravel their carefully constructed social climbing scheme. Thursday brought a development I hadn't expected: the community response. Dr. Rodriguez called to tell me that local news stations were picking up the story, and the response was overwhelming. Sarah, Channel 6 wants to interview you about what happened, but more importantly, we've received over $30,000 in donations for your medical expenses and recovery costs. People are calling you a hero for standing up to family financial abuse. A hero. For years, my family had made me feel like I was selfish, dramatic, and ungrateful. Now strangers were calling me heroic for simply refusing to accept being stolen from and medically neglected. But the interview request made me think strategically. My attorney, Catherine Walsh, had been advising me to stay quiet until the criminal case was resolved, but the public support was becoming a powerful tool. Catherine, what if I did give an interview? What are the risks versus the benefits? She thought about it carefully before responding. The risk is that your family's defense attorneys could use anything you say to try to discredit you. The benefit is that public opinion can influence everything from plea negotiations to sentencing recommendations. We decided I would do one carefully controlled interview, focusing on the facts and the impact of family financial abuse, without discussing details that could compromise the criminal case. The interview aired Friday evening. I sat in my living room, still moving carefully because of my surgery, and told my story calmly and factually. My family stole over $12,000 from me over more than a year to fund my brother's wedding. When I needed emergency surgery to prevent paralysis, they asked me to reschedule so I wouldn't miss the wedding reception. I chose surgery. They chose the party. The interviewer asked about the emotional impact. The financial theft was devastating, but the medical neglect was worse. My parents were willing to risk my permanent disability to avoid rescheduling a social event. That tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. The interview generated over 2 million views online within 48 hours and sparked a national conversation about family financial abuse. But more importantly for my case, it generated evidence. By Saturday morning, I had received over 300 emails from viewers sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Many included offers to testify as character witnesses about the long-term effects of systematic family theft and medical neglect. But 3 emails stood out because they came from people who had attended Marcus's wedding. The first was from Dr. James Patterson, a colleague of Emma's mother. Miss Mitchell, I was at your brother's wedding, and I specifically remember your parents talking about how proud they were that you had contributed financially to make the day special. They showed me their phones with text messages they claimed were from you, thanking them for handling the wedding expenses so you could focus on your health. I now realize those messages were fabricated, and I'm willing to testify about the false statements they made. The second was from Rebecca Chen, a wedding guest who worked at First National Bank, the same bank where my signature had been forged. I was at Marcus's wedding, and I remember your mother bragging about what a generous daughter you were, helping to pay for such an elaborate celebration. As a banking professional, I was impressed by what she described as your financial maturity. I had no idea the money was stolen. I'm willing to testify about the false statements made at the wedding about your supposed financial contributions. The third email was the most damaging of all. It came from the wedding photographer. Miss Mitchell, I photographed your brother's wedding, and I have thousands of photos from that day. Several show your parents displaying their phones to guests, showing what they claimed were grateful text messages from you about the wedding. I also have audio recordings from the reception where your parents repeatedly told people about your generous financial contributions. I'm willing to provide all of this evidence for your case. My family hadn't just stolen from me and neglected my medical emergency. They had used the wedding as an opportunity to publicly lie about my supposed financial contributions, enhancing their social status by claiming I was a generous sister who had helped fund the elaborate celebration. The evidence was overwhelming, but the real justice came from watching their carefully constructed social world collapse. Monday brought news from Detective Rodriguez about the investigation's expansion. Sarah, we've discovered additional victims. Your parents used similar techniques to steal from elderly family members, including your grandmother on your father's side. The total amount of theft we've identified is now over $38,000 across multiple victims. My grandmother. They had been stealing from my 84-year-old grandmother while simultaneously stealing from me. The woman who had sent me birthday cards with $20 bills every year since I was 5 years old had been systematically robbed by her own son. We're adding elder abuse charges to the list, which carry mandatory minimum sentences in Ohio. Your parents are now looking at 15 to 25 years in prison. Tuesday brought the plea negotiations, which I was allowed to observe via video conference. My parents' attorney, a public defender named Michael Stevens, tried to frame their crimes as family financial misunderstandings. Your Honor, my clients believed they were managing family finances for a shared family goal. There was never intent to permanently deprive their daughter of money. They viewed it as temporary borrowing to handle wedding expenses. Prosecutor Torres destroyed that argument immediately. Your Honor, the defendants forged signatures, used false identification, and created fraudulent documentation over a period of 13 months. This wasn't borrowing. It was sophisticated financial fraud. Moreover, when their victim needed emergency medical care, they prioritized the event funded with stolen money over preventing their daughter's potential paralysis. The judge was not impressed with the defense strategy. Mr. Stevens, your client stole nearly $40,000 from family members, including an elderly woman, to fund a social event. When their daughter faced emergency surgery, they attempted to pressure her to delay medical care to avoid interfering with the event they had funded with stolen money. This court sees no evidence of good faith family financial management. My parents rejected the first plea offer: 5 years in prison each, full restitution, and lifetime prohibition from accessing financial accounts belonging to family members. Wednesday brought the civil case developments. Catherine Walsh had filed a comprehensive lawsuit seeking not just the stolen money, but substantial damages for emotional distress, medical complications, and punitive damages for the deliberate nature of their crimes. Sarah, based on the criminal evidence and the community response, I'm confident we can get a judgment for at least $200,000 in total damages. But more importantly, the civil case will prevent them from hiding any assets or income for the next 20 years. Thursday brought the social collapse I'd been watching unfold since the arrests. Marcus and Emma's marriage was failing. The stress of criminal charges, job losses, and social ostracism had destroyed their relationship within 2 weeks of their $40,000 wedding. Emma had moved back in with her parents, who were now facing their own professional consequences because of their association with my family's crimes. Marcus had been fired from his consulting job and was working at a call center while awaiting trial. My parents had been evicted from their condo because their frozen bank accounts meant they couldn't make mortgage payments. The social circle they had been so desperate to impress had completely abandoned them. Friday brought the most satisfying development of all: community justice. The story had spread beyond Ohio to national news outlets, and my parents were being featured as examples of everything wrong with social climbing families who prioritize status over children's welfare. But locally, the response was more personal and more devastating to their social pretensions. Their church had quietly asked them not to attend services while the criminal case was pending. The country club where my mother had been so proud to network had revoked their membership. Emma's family had publicly distanced themselves from the Matthews Mitchell name Marcus had been so eager to adopt. Every social connection they had cultivated, every relationship they had built, every aspiration they had harbored, all of it was gone. They had traded my health for social status, and in the end, they had lost both my relationship and their reputation. The wedding they had prioritized over my surgery had cost them everything they cared about: their freedom, their financial security, their social standing, and their family. But for me, watching their carefully constructed world collapse brought something I hadn't expected: not satisfaction, but peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Free from trying to earn love from people who saw me as expendable. Free from making excuses for people who prioritized parties over my health. Free from a family that had been systematically stealing from me while pretending I was the burden. The justice wasn't just legal, it was personal. And it was complete. 6 months after my surgery, I was standing in front of 300 people at the Ohio Conference on Family Financial Abuse, telling my story not as a victim, but as an advocate. My spine had healed completely. Dr. Chen said my recovery was remarkable, but the real healing had happened in ways I never expected. The day my family chose my brother's wedding over my emergency surgery was the day I stopped trying to earn love from people who saw me as expendable. I told the audience of social workers, attorneys, and abuse survivors, sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they are. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most were the faces in the crowd. Dozens of people who had reached out after my story went public, sharing their own experiences of family financial abuse and medical neglect. My phone had become a lifeline for survivors across the country. Every day brought messages from people who had been stolen from by family members, gaslit about their financial struggles, or pressured to prioritize family events over their own welfare. Sarah, my sister, stole my identity to buy a car, and when I confronted her, my parents said I was being dramatic. My mother used my credit cards to pay for my brother's college, while I couldn't afford textbooks for my own classes. My family said I was selfish for not helping pay for my cousin's wedding, but they never asked. They just took money from my account. The patterns were always the same: a golden child whose needs came first, a scapegoat whose resources were seen as family property, and parents who enabled systematic abuse while portraying the victim as ungrateful or dramatic. But my story had done something unprecedented. It had created accountability with consequences that couldn't be hidden or explained away. The criminal case had concluded 3 months earlier with an outcome that exceeded everyone's expectations. My parents had ultimately accepted a plea deal: 7 years in state prison each, full restitution of all stolen money plus interest, lifetime prohibition from accessing financial accounts belonging to family members, and mandatory financial abuse education classes. Marcus had received 3 years probation, community service, and was required to pay restitution for the BMW that had been purchased with my stolen credit. But the real justice wasn't the legal consequences. It was the complete destruction of everything they had sacrificed my health to achieve. The social status they had craved was gone forever. Their names were permanently associated with family financial abuse in every Google search. The connections they had made through Emma's family had evaporated. The reputation they had built over decades was destroyed by their own choices. Emma had filed for divorce from Marcus 2 months after the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences and criminal behavior by the spouse's family. The marriage they had prioritized over my surgery had lasted exactly 67 days. Marcus was living in a studio apartment, working at a call center, and facing the reality that his association with financial crimes had made him unemployable. In his chosen field, the BMW had been repossessed, the condo had been foreclosed, the life he had built on stolen money had collapsed completely. Dr. Matthews had quietly removed the Matthews name from Marcus's hyphenated surname in all legal documents, effectively disowning him from the family that had once welcomed him so warmly. The social elevation he had sought through marriage had become social exile. But for me, the transformation had been the opposite of theirs. The community support that had started with my school district had grown into something extraordinary. The initial $8,000 raised for my medical expenses had become a foundation, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Family Financial Abuse Survivors, with over $200,000 in donations and a mission to provide legal support, financial counseling, and advocacy for abuse victims. Ohio University, my alma mater, had offered me a position developing curriculum for their social work program on identifying and responding to family financial abuse. I had gone from being a high school English teacher, struggling to pay bills, to being a recognized expert in a field I had never intended to enter. The teaching job I loved had become something even more meaningful. My students, who had witnessed my struggle and recovery, had started a peer counseling program for teenagers dealing with family financial manipulation. 17-year-olds were learning to recognize the warning signs of family abuse and helping each other establish financial independence. Miss Mitchell, one of my students had said during a class discussion about financial literacy, "You taught us that family isn't always safe, but that doesn't mean we're powerless." That student, Maya, had used the lessons from my experience to recognize that her own mother was stealing from her part-time job earnings to fund gambling addiction. Instead of suffering in silence like I had for years, Maya had gotten help immediately, protected her assets, and maintained her relationship with her mother while establishing clear financial boundaries. The ripple effects of speaking out had created protection for people I would never meet. But the most profound transformation had been personal. I had started dating again, something I'd avoided for years because my family had conditioned me to believe I wasn't worth investing in. David Chen, Dr. Chen's brother, as it turned out, she had introduced us, was a financial planner who specialized in helping abuse survivors rebuild their credit and financial security. "Sarah, you realize you saved more than just yourself," he had said during one of our early conversations. "Every person who hears your story and recognizes their own situation, you've given them permission to value themselves enough to get help." We had been together for 4 months, and for the first time in my life, I was in a relationship where my needs mattered as much as my partner's, where my successes were celebrated instead of minimized, where my boundaries were respected instead of challenged. David had been there the day I received the final restitution payment from my parents. Not just the stolen money, but additional damages awarded by the civil court. $47,000 that represented not just financial recovery, but vindication of everything I had endured. "What are you going to do with it?" he had asked. "I'm going to do something my family never expected," I had told him. "I'm going to help other people." Half of the money had gone to expanding the foundation. The other half had bought me a small house, the first home I had ever owned, purchased with money that represented my freedom from family financial abuse. The house was modest but perfect. A 2-bedroom cottage with a garden where I could grow. The vegetables my family had always said were too much work and not worth the effort. Every tomato I harvested felt like proof that I was worth the investment of time and care. But the most meaningful transformation had been unexpected. Reconciliation with the extended family I had lost touch with years earlier. My grandmother, the other victim of my parents' theft, had reached out after reading about the case in the newspaper. At 84, she was sharper than my parents had ever given her credit for, and she had suspected the financial irregularities in her accounts for months. "Sarah, dear," she had said during our first phone call in 3 years, "I always wondered why you stopped visiting. Your parents told me you were too busy with your career to spend time with family." Another lie. I had stopped visiting because my parents had made it clear that my presence was disruptive to their carefully managed family image. They had told me grandmother was doing fine and didn't need visits from grandchildren who couldn't contribute financially to family gatherings. "I've been thinking about everything your parents did," grandmother had continued, "and I realize they've been controlling our family relationships for years. They decided who was welcome at holidays, who got invited to celebrations, who was worth maintaining contact with." That conversation had led to rebuilding relationships with aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. People who had been told I was too busy or going through a difficult phase, when really my parents had been systematically isolating me from anyone who might have supported me or questioned their treatment. My cousin Jennifer, who was a nurse practitioner, had been particularly appalled when she learned about the medical neglect. "Sarah, if I had known you were having back problems for months, I would have helped you find specialists and navigate the medical system. Mom and Dad told us you were doing great and didn't need family support. The isolation had been part of the abuse, cutting me off from family members who might have offered help, support, or simply witnessed what was happening. But now, a year after my surgery, I was surrounded by a chosen family, colleagues who respected my work, students who were inspired by my recovery, a partner who celebrated my strength, extended family who had been deceived about my circumstances, and a community of survivors who understood exactly what I had endured. The contrast with my nuclear family's situation was stark and intentional. My parents were in their second year of prison, sharing a cell block with other white-collar criminals who had also prioritized money over family welfare. They were required to participate in financial abuse education programs, where they had to confront the impact of their crimes on victims. According to their counselor, who provided updates as part of the restitution agreement, they still insisted they had been helping me by managing my financial contributions to family events. Even in prison, they couldn't acknowledge that stealing $12,000 and risking my paralysis had been wrong. Marcus was still working at the call center, still living in the studio apartment, still facing the reality that his criminal record had made him unemployable in consulting. He had reached out once, 6 months after the sentencing, with an email that was supposed to be an apology but read more like blame. "Sarah, I hope you're happy with what you've done to our family. Mom and Dad are in prison, I lost my career, and Emma left me. I know you think we treated you badly, but we never meant for things to turn out this way." Even his apology focused on the consequences to him, rather than the harm they had caused me. He still saw their imprisonment as something I had done to them, rather than consequences they had earned through their own choices. I hadn't responded to the email. There was nothing left to say to someone who still couldn't understand that preventing my paralysis had been more important than preserving their wedding day. But I had shared the email with Dr. Sarah Chen, the victim's advocate who had become both a professional mentor and a personal friend. "Sarah, that email perfectly illustrates why you made the right choice," she had said. "He's more upset about the consequences of their crimes than he is about the crimes themselves. That tells you everything you need to know about whether reconciliation would be healthy for you." The foundation work had introduced me to other family financial abuse survivors, and I had learned that attempted reconciliation often led to repeated abuse. Families who steal from members rarely do it once. It's usually part of a pattern of seeing certain family members as resources rather than people. The best thing you can do, one of my fellow survivors had told me, is build a life so good that you never need anything from the people who hurt you. That had become my philosophy. Radical self-sufficiency combined with chosen family and community support. A year after my surgery, I was financially stable for the first time in my adult life. The foundation work paid well, the teaching position had been made permanent with a raise, and the speaking engagements provided additional income that I was using to build genuine financial security. But more than the money, I had something I'd never experienced before: peace. I didn't wake up wondering what crisis my family would create. I didn't check my bank account daily to see if money had been stolen. I didn't worry about whether my health concerns would be dismissed or my boundaries violated. I had learned to trust my own judgment about what was urgent, what was important, and what was worth my time and energy. The anniversary of my surgery fell on a Saturday. Instead of spending it thinking about what my family had done to me, I spent it celebrating what I had built despite them. David and I hosted a backyard barbecue for 25 people, colleagues from the foundation, friends from the school district, extended family members I had reconnected with, and several survivors who had become close friends. As I looked around the garden at people who had chosen to be part of my life, who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges, I realized something profound. I had never actually lost a family. I had escaped people who were pretending to be family while systematically abusing me. And in doing so, I had found my real family. People who proved their love through actions rather than demanding it through manipulation. The final vindication came in a way I never expected. 3 months after the anniversary barbecue, I received a call from a producer at a major television network. They wanted to do a documentary about family financial abuse, featuring my story as the central case study. Sarah, your case has become a landmark example of how systematic family abuse can be addressed through legal accountability and community support. We want to show other survivors that justice is possible and that healing can lead to advocacy. The documentary would reach millions of people, potentially helping countless others recognize and escape similar abuse. As I sat in my living room, looking at the contract that would bring my story to a national audience, I thought about the choice I had made that Tuesday morning in the hospital. Trust the doctor who wanted to save my ability to walk, or trust the family who wanted me to risk paralysis for their party. I had chosen correctly. And that choice had saved more than just my spine. It had saved my entire future. The people who had abandoned me during my medical emergency were now in prison. The brother whose wedding they had prioritized over my health was now divorced and struggling. The social status they had sacrificed my welfare to achieve was now permanently destroyed. But I was thriving, helping others, building meaningful relationships, and using my experience to create positive change in the world. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well and helping others do the same. And sometimes when people show you exactly who they are, the greatest gift you can give yourself is believing them and walking away to build something better. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.